"Sir, you need to move to the back. This section is for premium passengers only." The flight attendant's voice cut through first class like a blade. Marcus Williams didn't look up from his Wall Street Journal. He reached for his coffee and took another measured sip. Every eye in first class had turned toward him. The flight attendant stood there, arms crossed. Her name tag read Jennifer, but there was nothing cheerful about how she was looking at this impeccably dressed black man in seat 2A. "Excuse me, sir, did you hear me?" Jennifer's voice carried that particular tone, patience wearing thin, authority being questioned. "If 2X Colony decide to move out, then it will be my job to keep them here before questions." Jennifer hissed the words. Marcus folded his newspaper with deliberate precision. These are the real-life stories that reveal who we are when we think no one important is watching. The black stories that still unfold in 2025. The touching stories of discrimination that should be impossible. But here's what Jennifer didn't know. Here's what would change everything in the next 2 hours. Have you ever been so confident in your assumptions that you destroyed your own career in under 120 minutes? Welcome to Beat Stories, where real stories hit back. We don't just tell stories, we expose injustice. Because sometimes, one quiet voice can shake a whole corporation, and one smart move can spark a system-wide change. This is where intelligence meets prejudice, and justice speaks loud. Jennifer's eyes narrowed as she studied Marcus. There was something in her expression, a mixture of suspicion and certainty that didn't belong on anyone's face in 2025. But there it was, plain as day. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." Her voice carried across the cabin. Not quietly, not discreetly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket with the same measured calm. His boarding pass emerged. First class, seat 2A, exactly where he was sitting. He handed it to Jennifer without a word. She examined it like a detective studying evidence, turned it over, held it up to the light. Her colleague, Mike, appeared from the galley, drawn by the commotion. "Is there a problem?" Mike asked, his voice already carrying the assumption that yes, there was definitely a problem. "This boarding pass..." Jennifer paused, her finger tracing the edges. "It doesn't look right." The passengers around them shifted uncomfortably. A woman in 1B pulled out her phone, then another passenger, then another. The modern reflex, when something uncomfortable happens, we document it. The gate agent's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have 47 minutes until departure. Please have your boarding passes ready." 47 minutes. Jennifer had 47 minutes to figure out what was wrong with a perfectly valid boarding pass. "Sir, how did you obtain this ticket?" Jennifer's question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus looked up from his newspaper for the first time. His eyes met hers. Calm, steady, unflinching. "I purchased it." "From where?" "The airline." "Which website?" "Your website." Jennifer's jaw tightened. She wasn't getting the reaction she expected. No anger, no defensive explanations. Just simple, direct answers that should have ended this conversation before it started. But they didn't. "Mike, can you get the gate agent? I think we need to verify this ticket." Mike nodded and headed toward the aircraft door. The passengers were watching now, really watching. The woman in 1B had her phone pointed toward the conversation. The businessman in 3A had stopped typing on his laptop. While Jennifer and Mike whispered near the galley, Marcus returned to his newspaper. But here's what the cameras caught, what the passengers recording couldn't see clearly from their angles. His briefcase sat beside him. Premium leather, expensive, well-worn from travel. In the corner, embossed so subtly you'd miss it unless you knew what to look for, was a small logo. The same logo that appeared on every piece of airline equipment around them. His phone buzzed. The notification flashed across the screen. Board meeting 2:30 p.m. He dismissed it with a single swipe. The overhead speakers crackled again. "We'd like to welcome our corporate partners aboard today's flight." Marcus smiled slightly. Just slightly. The woman in 1B wasn't just recording anymore. She was live streaming. Her screen showed viewer numbers climbing. 1,200, then 2,400, then 5,000. "Guys, you're not going to believe what's happening on my flight right now," she whispered to her phone. "A flight attendant is questioning a black passenger's right to sit in first class. His ticket is valid, he's done nothing wrong, but she's treating him like he's committed a crime." The comments started flooding in, hundreds of them. The hashtag #FlightShame began trending in real time. Airport security cameras positioned throughout the cabin captured every moment, every gesture, every word, every assumption being made about a man who had done nothing more than purchase a seat and occupy it. Gate agent Rachel appeared at the aircraft door. Jennifer waved her over urgently. "We have a situation," Jennifer said, her voice carrying that particular authority that comes from certainty. "This passenger has a suspicious boarding pass. I think it might be fraudulent." Rachel looked at the boarding pass, then at Marcus, then at the boarding pass again. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside while we verify this ticket." Marcus didn't move. "I'm in my assigned seat with a valid ticket." "Sir, we have protocols for suspicious bookings." "What exactly is suspicious about my booking?" The question hung in the air. Rachel glanced at Jennifer. Jennifer looked at Mike. Mike stared at the boarding pass. None of them had an answer. "Sir, I'm going to need you to open your briefcase." The cabin fell silent. Even the engines seemed quieter. Marcus looked at Rachel with those same calm, steady eyes. "For what purpose?" "Random security screening." "Random?" The live stream viewer count hit 15,000. The comments were no longer just watching. They were organizing. Screenshots were being taken. Phone numbers were being researched. The modern accountability machine was spinning to life. 32 minutes until departure," the intercom announced. 32 minutes for Jennifer to prove her assumptions. 32 minutes to justify treating a paying customer like a criminal. 32 minutes to make sense of her certainty that something was wrong. But Marcus wasn't going anywhere, and he wasn't opening his briefcase. Not yet. The stage was set. The witnesses were recording. The evidence was accumulating. And Jennifer had no idea what was coming. Rachel stepped back from Marcus's seat and pulled out her radio. The static crackled through the cabin as she spoke in hushed, urgent tones. "Ground control, this is Gate 47. We need a supervisor at Aircraft 4 Alpha. Possible fraudulent ticket situation. Possible fraudulent ticket situation." Those words would be recorded, time-stamped, added to the growing mountain of evidence that this was never about a ticket. The woman live streaming from 1B, her name was Sarah, her followers would learn later, adjusted her phone angle. The viewer count had exploded to 25,000. The comments were no longer just supportive. They were furious. "This is 2025 and we're still doing this?" One comment read. "Get his name. Get the airline's name. This is unacceptable," read another. But Marcus remained still, newspaper folded in his lap, hands visible, breathing steady. A masterclass in composure under pressure. Heavy footsteps echoed through the jet bridge. Airport security supervisor Tom Bradley appeared at the aircraft door, his uniform crisp, his expression serious. Behind him, airport police officer Maria Santos adjusted her radio. "What's the situation?" Bradley asked. Jennifer launched into her explanation. The suspicious passenger, the questionable ticket, the refusal to cooperate with security screening. "Sir," Bradley addressed Marcus directly, I'm going to need you to step away from the aircraft while we sort this out. Marcus looked up at him. On what grounds? Suspicious activity. What activity? Bradley glanced at Jennifer. Jennifer looked at Rachel. Rachel studied the boarding pass again. Sir, you're being asked to comply with a security request. I'm being asked to leave my paid seat because of suspicious activity that no one can define. The live stream exploded. 50,000 viewers. Comments flooding in faster than anyone could read them. Screenshots being shared across social media platforms. The hashtag Justice for Marcus began trending nationwide. 15 minutes until departure, the intercom announced. 15 minutes. The plane was fully boarded except for this one situation. 147 passengers were waiting because of assumptions made about passenger number 148. The presentation. Captain Torres emerged from the cockpit. 23 years of flying experience. He'd seen it all, but this situation felt different. It had different. What's the delay? He asked Rachel. Fraudulent ticket situation, Captain. Captain Torres looked at the boarding pass, then at Marcus, then at the boarding pass again. His ticket appears valid, he said quietly. Sir, we have protocols, Jennifer insisted. What protocols require a passenger to leave their paid seat? Silence. The question hung in the air like turbulence. Sarah's live stream had become a phenomenon. News outlets were picking up the story in real time. Flight shame was trending globally. The airline's stock price had already dropped 2%. But here's what nobody noticed in the chaos. Marcus had been reading the same article for 20 minutes. An article about airline mergers, about corporate acquisitions, about board meetings that would reshape the industry. He turned the page deliberately. The headline read, SkyTech Airlines finalizes acquisition strategy. Officer Santos stepped forward. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. This was it. The moment when everything would change, when assumptions would meet reality, when the careful structure of discrimination would collapse under its own weight. Marcus closed his magazine, set it on the seat beside him, looked at Officer Santos with those same calm, steady eyes. Officer, before we go anywhere, I'd like to ask you a question. Sir, do you know what SkyTech Airlines is? The question seemed to come from nowhere. Officer Santos blinked. Sir? SkyTech Airlines, do you know what it is? No, sir, I don't. Marcus smiled, just slightly. It's a holding company, specializes in airline acquisitions. Jennifer's face showed confusion. Rachel looked irritated. Officer Santos appeared lost. Sir, I don't understand what that has to do with me. Acquire underperforming airlines, usually ones with customer service problems, discrimination issues, poor training protocols. The cabin had gone completely silent. Even the engine noise seemed muted. Sir, you need to step away from the aircraft. Marcus reached for his briefcase. Finally, the moment everyone had been waiting for. Officer Santos, I think there's been a misunderstanding. He opened the briefcase with deliberate precision. Inside, organized in perfect rows, were documents. Legal documents, financial reports, and something else. A business card holder. Marcus extracted a single card and handed it to Officer Santos. Officer Santos read it. Her face changed instantly. The color drained from her cheeks. Captain Torres, she called out, her voice completely different now. Captain, I think you need to see this. Captain Torres approached and took the card. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something approaching horror. Ma'am, he said to Rachel, I think we need to call your regional manager. Hey, Rachel asked. What's on the card? Captain Torres handed it to her. Rachel read it. Her hands began to shake. The card was simple, white, elegant, professional. It read, Marcus Williams, Chief Operating Officer, SkyTech Airlines. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Jennifer stared at the card. Mike backed away slowly. Rachel's radio slipped from her trembling fingers. Sarah's live stream viewer count hit 100,000. But she had stopped narrating. She was just watching the moment when assumption met reality. Watching the moment when discrimination met consequence. Marcus stood up slowly, calmly. He straightened his tie and looked at the assembled crew. "Now," he said quietly, "I think we need to have a conversation." 5 minutes until departure, the intercom announced. But nobody was thinking about departure anymore. They were thinking about what happens when you assume the worst about the person who holds your future in his hands. Marcus Williams wasn't just a passenger. He was the man who would decide whether their airline had a future at all. The board meeting wasn't just any meeting. It was the acquisition vote. The decision that would determine whether SkyTech Airlines would complete its purchase of their company. And Marcus Williams was the deciding vote. Marcus Williams stood in the center of first class, surrounded by airline employees who had spent the last hour treating him like a criminal. The business card had changed everything. But not everything. Not yet. "Mr. Williams," Captain Torres began, his voice careful, measured. "I apologize for this misunderstanding. If we could just—" "Captain Torres!" Marcus's voice cut through the apology like a blade. "Before we continue, I need everyone to understand exactly what's happening here." He reached into his briefcase again. This time he pulled out a tablet. The screen illuminated as he swiped it open. "Jennifer, you've been recording this interaction on the aircraft's security system, correct?" Jennifer nodded mutely. "And Rachel, your gate area cameras have been running the entire time?" Rachel managed a whispered, "Yes, sir." "Good. Because what's been recorded here isn't just discrimination. It's evidence." Sarah's live stream had reached 150,000 viewers. Comments were flooding in from around the world. But she had gone silent, sensing that something much bigger was about to unfold. Marcus turned his tablet toward the assembled crew. The screen showed a document. Official, legal, binding. "This is the acquisition agreement between SkyTech Airlines and your carrier, signed 3 weeks ago, filed with the SEC 2 weeks ago, made public 1 week ago." He scrolled down to a highlighted section. Section 4.2 specifically addresses employee conduct standards during the transition period. Any incidents of discrimination, bias, or customer service failures are to be documented and reviewed by the acquiring company's board of directors. Jennifer's face had gone completely white. Section 4.3 outlines the consequences for such incidents. Immediate termination. No severance, no appeal process. Marcus looked at each of them in turn. "The board meeting I'm attending this afternoon isn't just any board meeting. It's the final vote on whether to complete this acquisition." Officer Santos backed away slowly. She understood police procedures, but this was corporate law. This was beyond her jurisdiction. "You even won," Juliana. "Mr. Williams," Rachel stammered. "We didn't know—"
"No, you didn't know. But that's not the problem." Marcus's voice remained calm, professional. "The problem is that you didn't care to know." He tapped his tablet again. Another document appeared. "This is your employee handbook, updated 6 months ago. Page 47 specifically prohibits passenger profiling based on race, ethnicity, or perceived economic status." Jennifer tried to speak. "Sir, I wasn't—"
"You weren't what? Following protocols? You asked me to prove I could afford my seat. You suggested I was using a fraudulent ticket. You called security because a black man was sitting in first class."
The words hung in the air like an indictment.
Marcus checked his watch, then his phone. A notification appeared on the screen. "Board meeting moved to 3:00 p.m. Acquisition vote priority." He showed the screen to Captain Torres. "Captain, Do you understand what SkyTech's acquisition means for your airline? Issued his orders. Crews were being shipped out? Not exactly. SkyTech specializes in what we call rehabilitation acquisitions. We purchase airlines with systemic problems, customer service issues, discrimination lawsuits, poor employee training. Marcus scrolled through his tablet again. Financial reports, customer complaint data, discrimination incident reports. Your airline has been flagged by the Department of Transportation for discriminatory practices. 17 formal complaints this quarter alone. This incident will be complaint number 18. Rachel's hands were visibly shaking now. But here's what you really need to understand. SkyTech doesn't just acquire airlines. We decide whether they continue to exist. Marcus turned to address the entire cabin. Passengers were still recording. Sarah's live stream had become a global phenomenon. The story was being covered by news outlets in real time. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this delay. What you've witnessed today is exactly why SkyTech Airlines exists: to identify and eliminate discrimination in air travel. He faced the crew again. Jennifer, in the past hour, you violated federal anti-discrimination laws, company policy, and basic human decency. On camera, in front of witnesses, during a live stream being watched by hundreds of thousands of people.
Jennifer's legs seemed to give out. She grabbed the back of a seat for support. Rachel, as gate supervisor, you escalated the situation instead of de-escalating it. You called airport police on a passenger who had committed no crime. Mike, you supported discriminatory behavior without question or investigation. Marcus looked at each of them with those same calm, steady eyes. Officer Santos, Captain Torres, you both attempted to follow proper procedures once you understood the situation. You'll be noted in my report. Marcus tapped his tablet one more time, the screen filled with financial data. The acquisition vote this afternoon will determine whether SkyTech completes its purchase of your airline for $2.3 billion. The number hung in the air like thunder. If the vote passes, your airline continues to operate under SkyTech management, routes are preserved, most jobs are saved, customer service is completely overhauled. He scrolled to the next screen. If the vote fails, SkyTech walks away. Your airline faces bankruptcy within 6 months. All routes are canceled. All employees are terminated. The silence in the cabin was absolute. I am the deciding vote. Marcus Williams wasn't just a passenger who had been discriminated against. He wasn't just an executive who happened to be on the plane. He was the single person who would decide whether everyone on that aircraft had a job tomorrow. The man they had treated like a criminal held their entire future in his hands. Sarah's live stream viewers had reached 300,000. The hashtag flight shame was trending in 17 countries. Major news networks were breaking into regular programming. But inside that aircraft cabin, the only sound was the hum of engines and the weight of realization. Marcus closed his tablet and placed it back in his briefcase. He straightened his tie and looked at the assembled crew one final time. The board meeting begins in 2 hours. My recommendation to the board will be based on what I've experienced today. He paused. Jennifer, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from this aircraft. Rachel, you're suspended pending full investigation. Mike, you're suspended pending full investigation. Captain Torres, we'll discuss your crew management protocols during the flight. Marcus sat back down in seat 2A. He reopened his Wall Street Journal to the same page he'd been reading when this all began. Now, he said quietly, I believe we have a flight to catch. Officer Santos called for additional security, not for Marcus, for Jennifer. The same officer who had been asked to remove Marcus from the plane was now removing the flight attendant who had demanded his removal. The irony was lost on no one, especially not on the 400,000 people watching it happen live. The engines started. Flight 4 Alpha was finally ready for departure, but the real journey was just beginning. Marcus Williams sat in seat 2A, reading his newspaper as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just terminated an employee and suspended two others, as if 500,000 people weren't watching his every move through Sarah's live stream. Captain Torres approached cautiously. "Mr. Williams, with your permission, I'd like to conduct an emergency crew meeting once we're airborne." Marcus looked up from his paper. "Captain, I think that's an excellent idea." Jennifer was gone, escorted off the aircraft by the same security officers who had been called to remove Marcus. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Mike and Rachel remained on board, but only because federal regulations required their presence during flight operations. They would face the consequences after landing. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Marcus pulled out his tablet again, the screen illuminated with documents that would reshape everything. 30,000 feet above the ground, Captain Torres dimmed the cabin lights and made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be conducting a brief crew meeting. Please remain seated. We'll be back to normal service shortly." The remaining flight attendants gathered in first class. Sarah continued her live stream, now with 600,000 viewers worldwide. The hashtag flight shame had evolved into justice. Marcus stood and opened his tablet. The screen faced the assembled crew. "Let me show you exactly what happened down there and what's going to happen next." He tapped the screen. Financial data appeared. SkyTech Airlines acquired a controlling 51% stake in your airline on March 15th. Total purchase price, $1.2 billion for the controlling share. The numbers were staggering, real, verifiable.
Today's board meeting will vote on the remaining 49% acquisition. Total additional investment, $1.1 billion. Combined, this represents a $2.3 billion investment in your airline's future. Marcus scrolled to the next screen. Customer satisfaction scores for your airline, 2.3 out of 5 stars. Industry average, 3.7 stars. Discrimination complaints filed against your airline this quarter, 17. Industry average, 3. Employee sensitivity training completion rate, 23%. Industry standard, 100%. The data was damning, precise, irrefutable. Marcus turned to a new document. Legal text filled the screen. Section 12.4 of our acquisition agreement specifically addresses employee conduct standards. He read aloud. "Any employee found engaging in discriminatory behavior toward customers shall be subject to immediate termination without severance, benefits, or appeal process." Captain Torres shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Williams, Jennifer's actions don't represent our entire crew." "Captain, I agree. But they represent your training protocols, your management oversight, your corporate culture." Marcus scrolled to another section. Section 12.7 addresses systematic discrimination issues. If more than 3 verified incidents occurred during the transition period, the acquiring company reserves the right to terminate the acquisition agreement. The cabin fell silent. Today's incident is number 18. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and showed it to Captain Torres. Text from the SkyTech board chairman. "The vote has been moved up to 4:30 p.m. That's in 90 minutes. He put the phone away and faced the crew. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to make a recommendation to the board based on what I experienced today. Option 1, I recommend completion of the acquisition. Your airline survives. Most jobs are preserved. Mandatory bias training begins immediately. New management protocols are implemented. Customer service standards are raised to industry levels." He paused, letting that sink in. Option 2, I recommend termination of the acquisition. SkyTech walks away. Your airline faces bankruptcy within 90 days. All routes are canceled. All 12,000 employees lose their jobs. Your aircraft are sold to pay creditors. The weight of 12,000 jobs hung in the air like turbulence. Marcus opened another document. Personnel files. Jennifer Martinez, employee ID 47,291, hired 6 years ago. 3 customer complaints on file, 2 involving racial profiling. No disciplinary action taken. Rachel Chen, supervisor for 18 months. 17 discrimination complaints filed during her tenure. 0 investigations conducted. Mike Thompson, 5 years of service, 4 complaints, no training updates on record. The pattern was clear, systematic, institutional. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a culture of discrimination that your management has ignored. Captain Torres tried to respond. Mr. Williams, we can implement changes. Captain, you can't implement changes. You can only hope I recommend that SkyTech implement changes. Marcus showed them the voting structure. SkyTech's board consists of 7 members. 3 will vote to proceed, 3 will vote to withdraw. I am the 7th vote, the deciding vote. Marcus turned to a financial analysis that made everyone's blood run cold. If SkyTech withdraws, your airline's debt-to-equity ratio becomes unsustainable within 60 days. Your operational costs exceed revenue by 23% without SkyTech's capital injection. Your pension fund is underfunded by $340 million. Without our backing, it becomes insolvent. Your aircraft leases total $890 million annually. Without our credit guarantee, lessors will demand immediate payment. The numbers painted a picture of an airline surviving solely because of SkyTech's involvement. Jennifer's actions didn't just cost her a job. They potentially cost 12,000 people their jobs. Rachel's failure to intervene didn't just show poor judgment. It showed exactly why your airline was failing before SkyTech stepped in. Marcus closed the financial documents and opened one final file. If I recommend withdrawal, here's the timeline. Day 1. SkyTech announces termination of acquisition. Day 2. Your stock price drops 67%. Credit rating lowered to junk status. Day 7. Aircraft lessors demand security deposits totaling $340 million. Day 14. Major routes canceled due to insurance issues. Day 30. Employee layoffs begin. 3,000 jobs eliminated. Day 60. Bankruptcy filing. All operations suspended. Day 90. Asset liquidation begins. Company ceases to exist. The timeline was clinical, precise, devastating. Marcus stood and addressed not just the crew, but the 700,000 people watching the live stream. What happened today represents everything wrong with corporate culture in America. Assumptions based on race, discrimination disguised as protocol, power abused by people who forgot they serve customers, not judge them. He looked directly at the camera Sarah was holding. But it also represents everything right about accountability, about consequences, about using corporate power to create change instead of profit. Marcus checked his watch. The board vote begins in 45 minutes. My recommendation will be based on what I've seen, what I've experienced, and what I believe needs to change. He sat back down and reopened his newspaper. Captain Torres, I suggest you use the remaining flight time to think about how you're going to explain today's events to 12,000 employees. The cabin fell silent except for the hum of engines carrying them toward a decision that would reshape everything. Sarah's live stream had reached 1 million viewers. The whole world was watching, and Marcus Williams held their future in his hands. Flight 4 Alpha touched down at Chicago O'Hare at 3:47 p.m. Marcus Williams had exactly 43 minutes before the most important board vote in the airline's history. As passengers deplaned, Sarah ended her live stream. 6 hours. 1.2 million viewers. The story had reached every continent. Flight shame was trending in 23 countries. But the real consequences were just beginning. Jennifer Martinez was escorted through the terminal by airport security. The same woman who had demanded Marcus prove he belonged in first class was now being removed from the airline industry forever. Her termination had been processed mid-flight. Her security clearance revoked. Her career Over. Rachel Chen and Mike Thompson were suspended pending a formal investigation that would conclude in exactly the way everyone expected. Their personnel files would become case studies in what not to do. Officer Santos had already filed her report. It read simply, "Discrimination complaint verified. No law enforcement action required. Corporate matter resolved internally." Marcus sat in the SkyTech conference room at 4:28 p.m. 6 other board members faced him across polished mahogany. The vote would be recorded, documented, final. "Marcus," Chairman Robert Hayes began, "we've all seen the footage. We've reviewed the incident reports. What's your recommendation?" Marcus opened his tablet one final time. The same device that had revealed the truth at 30,000 feet would now determine the fate of 12,000 employees. "I recommend we proceed with the acquisition." The room exhaled collectively, but with conditions. Marcus stood and presented his reform plan. The document had been drafted during the flight, refined during descent, and finalized during taxi. Effective immediately, every employee undergoes mandatory bias sensitivity training. Not optional, not suggested, mandatory. Timeline: 30 days for customer-facing staff, 60 days for all employees, 90 days for management. Cost: $2.3 million. Non-negotiable. The board members took notes furiously. Second, we implement real-time discrimination monitoring. Every customer interaction in airports and aircraft will be recorded and reviewed. AI-powered analysis will flag potential bias incidents within 24 hours. Human review within 48 hours. Corrective action within 72 hours. Third, anonymous customer feedback goes directly to executive management. No filtering, no delays, no excuses. Marcus had never raised his voice, never threatened violence, never demanded money or personal compensation. Instead, he had used the system, legal contracts, financial leverage, corporate accountability. The very structures that enabled discrimination would now dismantle it. Jennifer Martinez's termination will be used as a training example in every sensitivity program we implement industry-wide. Her actions cost her a career, but they'll save thousands of customers from experiencing what I experienced. The board voted unanimously. 7-0. The acquisition proceeded. But it proceeded with the most comprehensive anti-discrimination protocols in aviation history. The changes began immediately. Within 24 hours, $500,000 allocated for emergency bias training. Customer service metrics recalibrated to include bias incident tracking. New hiring protocols emphasizing diversity and inclusion. Anonymous reporting system launched for discrimination complaints. Within 1 week. Industry consultants hired to review all customer service protocols. Quarterly discrimination audits. Scheduled at every airport hub. Customer service representatives given de-escalation training, focused on unconscious bias. Management accountability measures tied to discrimination incident rates. Within 1 month, every gate agent, flight attendant, and supervisor recertified in anti-discrimination protocols. Customer feedback system directly linked to executive performance reviews. Partnership with civil rights organizations to monitor progress. Public quarterly reports on discrimination, incident rates, and resolution. Sarah's live stream had become more than viral content. It became evidence, legal evidence, corporate evidence, cultural evidence. The video was used by the Department of Transportation in new bias training requirements for all domestic airlines. Harvard Business School added the incident to their ethics curriculum. The International Air Transport Association created new global standards based on Marcus's reform package. Jennifer's termination became a case study taught in customer service training programs worldwide. Within 6 months, 47 airlines had adopted similar bias monitoring systems. Customer discrimination complaints across the industry dropped by 34%. Employee bias training became an FAA requirement for all airline personnel. SkyTech's stock price increased 12% as investors recognized the value of proactive discrimination prevention. Marcus Williams was featured on the cover of Harvard Business Review. The headline, "When Corporate Power Meets Corporate Responsibility." But the real victory wasn't in the boardroom or the stock market. It was in the gate areas and aircraft cabins, where the next generation of airline employees would never think to question a passenger's right to sit in their paid seat, where assumptions would be replaced by training, where bias would be identified and corrected before it destroyed careers and traumatized customers, where a black man in first class would be seen as exactly what he was, a customer who deserved respect. Marcus Williams never spoke publicly about the incident. He never gave interviews or wrote books or started speaking tours. He simply did his job. He used his position responsibly. He turned a moment of personal humiliation into systematic change for millions of travelers. Jennifer Martinez learned that assumptions have consequences, that treating people as less than human costs more than just hurt feelings. Rachel Chen and Mike Thompson learned that failing to intervene makes you complicit, that supervisory authority comes with supervisory responsibility. Captain Torres learned that crew management means managing bias, not just managing schedules. And 12,000 airline employees learned that their jobs existed because someone chose accountability over revenge. Sarah's live stream had shown the world what discrimination looked like in real time, but Marcus's response showed what justice could look like when corporate power was wielded responsibly. The video was viewed 15 million times, shared across every social media platform, translated into 23 languages. But more importantly, it changed behavior. Airport employees knew they were being watched. Airline executives knew discrimination had consequences. Passengers knew they had allies in corporate leadership. The incident report filed that day was exactly 847 words long. It concluded, "Customer complaint resolved through corporate accountability measures, systematic reforms implemented, no further action required." But those 847 words represented something much larger. They represented the moment when corporate America proved it could choose justice over profit, accountability over denial, and systematic change over systematic discrimination. Marcus Williams had turned 47 minutes of humiliation into a lifetime of reform. And he had done it without raising his voice once. 3 months later, Marcus Williams was back in Seat 2A on the same route. First class, reading the Wall Street Journal, drinking coffee. But everything had changed. The flight attendant approached with a genuine smile. "Good morning, Mr. Williams. Welcome aboard. Is there anything I can get you before departure?" No assumptions, no suspicion, no questions about whether he belonged there. Just service, professional, respectful service. This is what accountability looks like. This is what happens when corporate power chooses justice over indifference, when systematic change replaces systematic discrimination. Marcus had proven that dignity isn't negotiable, that respect transcends assumptions, that the right response to injustice isn't anger, it's action. The incident that began with Jennifer Martinez demanding Marcus prove his worth had become a case study in ethical leadership, taught at business schools worldwide. Marcus Williams didn't become famous. He didn't write books or start foundations or give motivational speeches. He simply continued doing his job, making decisions, using power responsibly. But every time an airline employee completed bias training, they learned about Flight 4 Alpha. Every time a discrimination complaint was filed, it was processed through systems Marcus had designed. Every time a passenger was treated with dignity, regardless of race or perceived status, it was because Marcus had chosen reform over revenge. These are the life stories that change the world. The real-life stories of people who transform moments of injustice into movements of change. The black stories that prove resilience can reshape entire industries. The touching stories that remind us corporate accountability is possible when the right person is in the right position at the right moment. Sarah's live stream had done more than document discrimination. It had created a new standard for accountability. Passengers knew they had power, the power to record, to share, to demand justice. Airlines knew they were being watched. Every interaction was potentially viral. Every assumption was potentially career-ending. The hashtag flight shame had evolved into flight justice. Stories of positive interactions, examples of excellent service, proof that change was real and lasting. Jennifer Martinez had become a cautionary tale, but Marcus Williams had become proof that one person can change an entire industry. The numbers told the story. Airline discrimination complaints down 67% industry-wide. Customer satisfaction scores up 23% across all major carriers. Employee bias training completion 100% at 89% of airlines. Discrimination incident resolution time averaged 2.1 days, down from 47 days. But the real measurement wasn't in statistics. It was in the black businessmen who boarded first class without being questioned. The elderly woman who received help without being ignored. The young traveler who was treated with respect, regardless of their appearance. Marcus Williams had weaponized corporate structure against discrimination itself, and won. Flight 4 Alpha landed exactly on time that day 3 months ago, but its impact would last forever. Every airline employee hired since then had been trained on the incident. Every customer service protocol had been revised. Every discrimination complaint was processed with the knowledge that accountability was real, immediate, and career-defining. Marcus had proven that institutional change doesn't require protests or lawsuits or publicity campaigns. Sometimes it just requires the right person in the right seat making the right choice. This story belongs to all of us. Every time you witness discrimination, every time you see someone being treated as less than human because of their race, their appearance, their perceived status, you have power. The power to record, to document, to hold people accountable. A Fiat detective called David Mitchell, Officer 12. But more than that, you have the power to choose how you respond when you have leverage, when you're in a position to create change or seek revenge, when you can choose systematic reform or personal satisfaction. Marcus Williams chose accountability. He chose reform. He chose to use his power to ensure no one else would experience what he experienced. Have you witnessed discrimination that should have been filmed? Share your story in the comments below. Have you seen someone use their position to create positive change instead of seeking revenge? Tell us about it. Have you been in a situation where you could choose accountability over anger? How did you handle it? These real-life stories matter. These black stories of resilience and justice inspire change. These touching stories of corporate accountability prove that power can be used responsibly. Share this video with someone who needs to see that justice is possible, that change is real, that one person in the right position can reshape an entire industry. Subscribe for more stories of accountability, justice, and proof that systematic change is possible when the right person makes the right choice. Because sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't a lawsuit or a protest. Sometimes it's a business card and a board vote. And sometimes that's enough to change everything.